So I'm looking at this and I showed my translator. I was like, how do you say this? And so he starts laughing. He's like, well, don't say in, in the public. Don't say that to children. And I said, okay, well, we're off to a good start. And so he told me how to say it. And so I listened to it over and over again because that's how I learn foreign languages, by listening, not by saying. And I said, okay, so what does it mean? And he said, depends on where you're from. It either means Putin is an asshole, a cocksucker, like bad words, right? So that was my first phrase. It's Putin huilo, right? Hi everyone, welcome to Behind the Booth. I'm Jade, and with me as always is my co-host and producer, Heather.
And on this channel, we talk about wild stories from Comic-Con vendors. And actually our next convention, because we would love to meet you guys, like please, we want to meet you guys. We want you to see what we're doing and how we're figuring all this out. Our next convention is going to be at MegaCon.
Yes, yes, MegaCon is amazing. It's going to be 4 days. It's in the resort area of Florida. I'm super excited. My hair is going to frizz. It's going to be a thing. We would love to see you at our booth at Tokyo Dog Designs.
And I will actually be there. I'm not there at every convention with Jade, so I'm super excited and we want to meet you guys. But back to today's topic. So Jade has been doing events for what, over a year now? About a year?
Oh, I wish. No, like 9 months.
9 months. Was that really when the first event was? Was 9 months ago?
Yeah, it was in March or April.
Oh, okay. So about a year.
But it was my first little event that I had no idea what I was doing, and I was just feeling out the crowd. Yeah. But my first official event that was like a real event was Starfest.
Okay.
And we can talk about Starfest. That one's in May.
Yeah.
But my very first event, I want to say, was in April, and that was with Ukrainians of Colorado.
Yeah. And that was right when all of that was kind of going bonkers, right? I mean, it had been for a while, but still, that was a really kind of crucial time. So yeah, talk about that.
Yeah. So I had been talking to somebody who is a mutual connection from Russia, and she was talking about an event she was going to that weekend, which is why we couldn't connect. I said, okay, well, that sounds like fun. She's like, well, do you want to come? And I said, sure. And it was a fundraiser for Ukraine. There's a lot that goes on with the Ukrainians of Colorado. They do a lot of really great work. They are a nonprofit. If you'd like to know about them in more detail, we can put that information in the description. But what they were working on at that time was getting enough money donated to get medical supplies packed up in suitcases and then sending people by plane from Denver to Ukraine and some of the borders to get medical supplies to soldiers and civilians. So they had this opportunity to have a booth there. And I had just come up with this fish design that I have behind me. And when the war happened, I actually made a stencil of the Ukrainian birds. There's a bird that is their country bird. And I'd made it. I wanted to try it out. Brea was walking the halls. I was going to go yell at her. And this is a great point because you can put in a picture at that point anyways. Brea, lay down. Go. Go. So mean to my kid.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I'll get you photos and videos of this. But I had made this design and I had made them into little pins that you could wear on your chest out of paper. And so I had a bunch of these that I was just going to hand out. I made a ton of them. And they're like, well, do you want a booth? I was like, sure. So I'm doing all this typing on Facebook through Messenger. When I get there, I'm like, hi, I'm here for, this. And the person I was talking to didn't speak English. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll find somebody else. And the next person didn't speak English. And so I talked to 5 people. I'm like, I know I'm in the right place because it literally says Ukrainians of Colorado outside the building. I checked in on Facebook, this is the right place. And then finally somebody's just like, I find you Irina. I find you Irina. I was like, okay, great. And Irina, who I'd been talking to, her English is pretty decent, but she had no idea who I was, what I was doing there. She's like, did you bring your own table? And I was like, we will figure this out.
Yeah.
And the Ukrainians do not mess around. If they say you have 45 minutes to set up your table, you better be fucking ready. Get your shit together, set up your table. So I only had a couple of things, but I had never showcased before. I had applied to a bunch of events and got turned down because I had never done an event before.
Yeah.
And we talk about that in the other episodes as well. So I'm sitting there, I have other people around me, and no one is speaking English to me, which is fine. I just don't speak Ukrainian. I speak German, I speak Spanish, kind of. I'm learning French right now. I speak Japanese. It's not that I didn't have any experience in it. I just really didn't speak Ukrainian. I knew some Russian.
Mhm.
Some Ukrainians know Russian. I won't say that all of them do, but it's very common. And so I was hearing Russian and I was hearing Ukrainian the whole time I was there and set up. And then eventually somebody gets next to me and he speaks English and Ukrainian and Russian. I was like,
Mm,
oh my God.
that's good.
I got really lucky because I was thinking it was a fundraiser. It was in the United States. It was in Denver, Colorado. And I had basically signed up 48 hours before the event started. So I knew no Ukrainian. I had gotten an app. I tried learning, but it was really not, helpful.
Yeah.
So I'm set up. I'm next to this guy, and all this stuff is happening. And it was so awesome. They had Ukrainian food. Everyone was speaking a foreign language. It was like being in another country.
Yeah.
And all their announcements were in Ukrainian or in Russian. None of their announcements were in English. So
Mhm.
they were saying things like that you normally hear at a convention, like, we'll be opening the doors in 10 minutes. Or if you're driving this car, which car is Machina, by the way, I learned that. If you drive this car, you need to move it. Like, these were all announcements. I had no idea what they were saying. So I was asking him, I was like, hey, what are they saying? And he's like, oh, they're saying, move your car. And he had no accent at
Mm.
all. Um, but I was learning and listening from him. So there was this one guy who taught me my first phrase in Ukrainian. Very proud of this phrase. He came up to me and he's talking to my translator. I'm going to refer to him as my translator. Alex was his name. Um, the translator was saying, he's asking why you don't speak Ukrainian. I said, oh, I'm not from there. I don't know anybody from there. And he's like, wait, you're coming to do this fundraiser and you don't know anybody? I'm like, no. He's like, well, why are you here? I was like, I'm here because it's the right thing to do. I want to be supportive and I don't know what I'm doing. And so we're just going to try this out and see what happens. And this guy is just like, okay, I'll make you Ukrainian today. I said, okay. He's like, I want you to learn this phrase. And he handed me a license plate cover. And it has the Ukrainian flag on the back. So it has the two colors, the blue and the yellow. And it says Putin on the first part. And I was like, well, that can't be good. Like, what are we advertising here? And then the other word, I mean, these were written in like English letters
Mhm.
because Cyrillic is its own language form.
Alphabet, yeah.
Yeah. And so it said Putin and the other part said Huilo. And so I'm looking at this and I showed my translator. I was like, how do you say this? And so he starts laughing. He's like, well, don't say in, in the public, don't say that to children. And I said, okay, well, we're off to a good start. And so he told me how to say it. And so I listened to it over and over again because that's how I learn foreign languages, by listening, not by seeing. And I said, okay, so what does it mean? And he said, depends on where you're from. It either means Putin is an asshole, a cocksucker, like bad words, right? So that was my first phrase. It's Putin huilo, right? Then my second phrase was thank you, dyakuyu. And I learned that, and those were the two phrases I learned for the weekend
Yeah.
that got me by. And what was really nice is that some people would come up to me. I didn't know this at the time. They would say either in Russian or Ukrainian, are you Russian or Ukrainian? Because those were the two languages that were spoken.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, no, I'm Amerikansky.
Yeah.
That is incorrect, by the way. That was explained to me by somebody who was another translator.
Really?
So Amerikansky means like this is an American passport, this is an American phone, this is like it's American, not that I'm American. So they said
Oh.
for me it would be
So it doesn't
American.
work for American person?
No. So
Hmm.
for me, because I identify as a woman, it's Americanka.
Oh, okay.
And so I just say Americanka. And
There
they're
you
like,
go.
oh, okay. And they'll start speaking English to me. I'm like, oh, thank God. Or the kids, a lot of the kids are bilingual, but the reason nobody spoke English there is a lot of them were refugees.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that most of them there were refugees and there were people from the community coming in and supporting. So as people started showing up, then English was starting to be spoken.
Yeah.
So all these refugees are there helping set up, helping trying to, raise money. They're putting kits together to send overseas. So that's why no one spoke English, except for like two people and then my new friend. My friend, my translator needed somewhere to put, he was selling t-shirts and I have a 6-foot table. that we use for like tabletop, MTG, yeah, that kind of stuff. So I just scooted all my shit to one side, let him have the other half of the table. And then I found out he spoke English. I'm like, okay, cool. So every time there's something going on, I'd be like, hey, what are they saying?
Yeah.
Okay, what are they saying? And then I learned. So they had this, there's this chant that they do. And I didn't know what they were saying, but I was just like, yeah, woo, like in the background. But it's Slava Ukraini, Slava Ukraini. And they have like this chant that goes back and forth, kind of like the callback that you hear in church.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I don't know what it is. So every time they said something, I'm like, yeah, woo, yeah, because I didn't know that I was being supportive. And so now I know how to do it and partake. But at the time, I had no idea what they were saying.
Yeah.
And the food there was all Ukrainian food. So when I wanted to eat something, and I'm not afraid to try food, it's one of the things about being where I'm from, where I lived everywhere, you just try it. Like I've eaten, like hearts from animals that are still beating. Like I've eaten raw things. I've eaten cooked things that I didn't know what they were until later, like cuis. If you want to know what a cuy is, search that.
Should we tell people to search that? How do you even spell that?
I don't know. I just know how it sounds. It's a Peruvian food. So basically it's guinea pig.
Oh,
yeah.
It's just guinea pig meat?
Yeah, it's guinea pig meat, but it's weird for us, like from the United States, to eat guinea pigs, because they're pets, but over
like
there,
eating a hamster.
Yeah, it's like having a pet chicken, or maybe almost like that lives in your house. Yeah, so it's a thing. Yeah, we'll see if they do hamster as a side dish. So anyways, they have all this food. I don't know what any of it is. It's all written in Cyrillic. So I have no idea what it says. And everyone handing out the food is not speaking English as well, because they're all volunteers. And there was one other person I ran into who was also a volunteer, American. I guess her pen pal was Ukrainian or something. And I was like, hey, I'm like, how much are things? She's just like, oh my God, you speak English. I'm like, yeah, I do. What are we eating? She's like, I have no idea what any of this is, but this is $5. This is $2. It's just point. I'm like, I've got $10. What can we get? And so I just tried everything. I didn't know what borscht was. I didn't know what pierogi were. I didn't know what any of these foods were, but I ate them and they were amazing because it was home cooked food, like a potluck almost. And so I took it back to my table. I'm eating this. I'm like, I have no idea what this is, but we're going to try it. And then the guy next to me was like, oh, those are pierogi. And I was like, what is that? And so he got to explain to me like what these different foods were. And he wanted me to try these donuts. I didn't get a chance to, but there's some type of like beignet almost. They're kind of close to a beignet.
Cool.
But everyone had little bags of them walking around. And then by the time I was able to go get some, they were sold out. But he's just like, oh my gosh, they're so good. So-and-so's aunt makes them. And I'm like here? They're like, yeah, they made them like yesterday. Like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. But it was my first time to actually have a booth, interact with people, even though it wasn't in English. I learned some numbers, which was helpful to tell people how much things were, although finger numbers are also working. But piat is 5. You want to piat? And I learned how to say I was hungry by the end of the day. Because that was an important one to say. Because this like motion of rubbing my stomach, not everyone really understood what that was. I was like, so how do I say that? Yeah, they thought it was probably just weird because that sign language is not universal and at all. But I was like, yeah, holodna. And they're just like, oh, okay. And they just hand you food. So I was like, yeah, let's get that works. But I didn't know how much they would tell me the numbers of how much it cost. I had no idea. And the girl that spoke English had left for the day. So I'm like, I just hold up money and they take it. But it was a really important experience because I got a chance to see what people like. Are things priced well? For fundraisers and stuff, people are willing to pay more or donate more. I had giveaways on my table. So those little birds I was talking about, they were by donation. And I just had a little jar and I wrote by donation. Then I had somebody else write it in Cyrillic, in Russian and Ukrainian, because I didn't know how to say donation in those languages. And Google Translate was not helpful, especially in a room where the cell service isn't working. Yeah, I know a bunch of you out there like, why did you just use Google Translate? Yeah, my cell phone service was not working for that. There's no way I could get my point across. And I know there's a way to download it, but it doesn't really help me at the time.
Well, also in a big room with a lot of people talking, like it's not,
And I mean, I was expecting to be in a setting that had English, and that was my mistake. I needed to be more culturally aware that I was going into a situation that probably didn't have English as an option. So now I am studying Ukrainian. Now I am learning. So that way, when I do more of these fundraisers, I'm available to do it. But it was a good opportunity because the booth was free. I got to showcase my 2 stencils I had. Well, technically at the time 3. I figured out what people liked. I learned about inventory. I learned about how to appropriately account for like math and tax,
Hmm.
which as a nonprofit was its own thing. So I had to learn about that. Um, but it was a great opportunity to interact, and I got to learn about another culture.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, they had performances, they had musicians, they had professional speakers, which I really did not get the most out of the professional speaker because I was getting a translation that was kind of slow.
It's like playing telephone.
Yeah, and he would say things like, "Well, it's he means this, but that's not really what that means."
Yeah.
Like, when they're speaking. So, um, and everyone kept asking me, "Who do you know?" And I was like, "I don't know anybody." But then to see all these people that had somebody back there,
Yeah.
or that had somebody who'd lost their life, who had been killed in action, like these are very sad stories that you hear. But it was my first experience out in that, and it wasn't like how we see things now. Like you see it on CNN, you see it on BBC, you see these clips and stuff. Like I experienced what they were experiencing, but just the scratching the surface of it.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's lost a family member, that's tragic and hard, but then also have it be within this a whole other political conflict. And
Where people have
it,
opinions about it.
it was a lot to learn, and I was very grateful for the experience. And I'm always contacting them saying, "Hey, I've painted more wine glasses. Do you want them for your next fundraiser? Are you having more events?" They have spring events, they have winter events, and a portion of everything you sell goes to them. I donate more if I can. So that way they have more money to basically put this money together, get supplies, and literally send people who are going into dangerous areas, into war zones across borders to get these supplies to where they need to go.
Yeah.
So if you ever want to try out, your product, your business, of course, this is, if you're talking analytics and such, it's a very specific culture. It's a very specific group of people. It may not translate, it may not be what they want, but it was an opportunity for people to see my product for the very first time, for me to help somebody else out. And I felt very welcomed. They are very courageous and extremely kind and loving people.
Yeah. And that was just a really great experience for you. Especially I think it's really kind of poignant that that was your first one, that
Mhm.
you were really kind of thrown into all that stuff that, that you had to learn and figure out. And also on the added, it was, it was a benefit for these amazing people and you got to like experience that whole thing. I thought that was really cool.
And I was grateful we were able to raise so much money within the
Yeah.
community. And I was definitely grateful when there was more English, because I could really speak and help and be a part of things. And the kids were great because the kids were bilingual, so they could
Yeah.
help me translate and learn things. I learned koshka.
Hmm.
It's for the little animals that I have at my table. So I learned some of those
Oh,
like things, because the kids will tell you and the kids will share with you. And I'm like, okay, great. Because, kids are so limited in their vocabulary.
yeah.
And that's where my vocab was, because I didn't know anything.
Look, I can
So
talk to
I was
you.
like, I'm like, okay, Koshka, I got it. Yeah, let's do that. I'm
Yeah.
like Sabaki and all these cute. But again, I don't know if that was Ukrainian or Russian, because the kids were speaking both.
Yeah.
So I'm like, Sabaka, Koshka, я не знаю. Oh, that's the other thing I learned. Я не знаю means I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know.
That's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. I learned that one, I think, right after I'm hungry. So
Yeah. I'm hungry. I don't know. Like, okay, you say I'm hungry, and then they start talking about the foods, and you're like, ah, no,
like, I
no,
don't know.
no, no.
Um, and especially when people come up and start talking to me, and I'd be like, "Я не знаю, американка, я не знаю." And they're like, "Oh, okay." We'll just
I
move on.
got it.
So it's great. So if you ever get an opportunity, if you have a new product, or if you've never done anything, remotely like this kind of stuff before, and you want to try it out, a lot of nonprofits are great places to start.
Yeah.
They do a lot of outreach advertising because they want people to come to these things to raise money. So you get that exposure. You get to meet a lot of people that are having their heart in the right place, and who are there to spend money, to help out someone else. And a lot of times their booth fees are really low or reasonable, or they just want a percentage, like, which is, I think, completely fair. The venues are usually huge. And when I say huge, like for a small scale, like it'll be an entire building or a church or a recreation center or
Yeah.
something like that. And it's an awesome start spot if you have no idea what you're doing, like I didn't. I mean, try nothing else. You're able to help a cause, and that should be reason enough.
And it'll be an experience, whether and you can make of it what you will. But yeah, like going to those finding ones that are in there that are in your area that will be easy quote unquote to get into and possibly low fees. Pay attention to that and yeah, just get your feet wet, get started. And if you have any other specific questions that you would like to ask us on this podcast, email us at talkbehindthebooth@gmail.com or find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok at either Behind the Booth or Talk Behind the Booth. And because we would love to answer your questions, we would love to see you. We would love to meet you. Like we said, we're going to MegaCon in a little bit.
Yes.
I guess by the time this airs, we'll actually already be in Orlando because that'll be Thursday.
Yeah.
Oh my
So come by and
gosh.
see us if you hear
Yeah.
this episode.
Come
But
by and see us, and we'd love to talk to you.
a special thank you to Nerdy Girl Podcast for sponsoring this episode. We'll see you next time.